Evie, super honored and excited to chat with you again. I find our conversations are always super fulfilling personally, and people seem to love listening to them or watching them as well, which is nice. So I appreciate you being back and chatting to me.
Couldn't be happier, man. I always get like selfishly excited because I always walk away from this like, dang, I didn't consider that. I didn't think about that before. So only hoping that I can return the favor, you know.
We're having this conversation the 28th of December. People listening, it'll be a little bit later by the time we publish it. But it's kind of closing off the year. And whenever we close off the year, there's usually a lot of reflection that comes. And I do want to get into some reflection with you in this conversation in more pointed ways. I want to make a quick note to the listeners. I have just published a productivity manifesto course that I did with EB, and there are 7 chapters on that. So it's all about meaningful productivity and some of the productivity traps that we fall into. So that'll be available on the YouTube channel, and I'm going to link to it. So that's just like a really good place to get more familiar with EB's thinking as you make your way through the episode. But yeah, I just want to start with just what's been going on for you. What's alive for you? What are you focusing on right now? Since the last conversation, what's been going on in your life?
Oh man. The past few months, I'm currently sitting in my house in Argentina. End of December. I've been here for about a month. The 2 big things that have both actually happened and come to a close since I think we last spoke. One is we ran and closed the Warrior 100. We ran a 100-day kind of initiation into the warrior archetype. The other thing that came and went actually in the course of the 100 days of the Warrior 100 was we ran our last 2 iterations of the Apotheosis plant medicine retreats, which were incredible. And actually the combination of being in the kind of warrior dojo and going into deep medicine work and coming back out into that was honestly phenomenal. Happy to talk anything about that. There are 2 equal things in my life that I'm looking forward to. In about, we're getting up there, about 2 weeks from now, mid-January, we're releasing the 2nd version of the Hero 100. I think we spoke on that last time we spoke. So we're coming in hot and heavy with version 2, iterated a whole bunch, leveled it up a whole lot. I am really excited for that. And my partner Chloe and I are actually planning on moving in, the end of February. I think we're going to try to put down roots in Costa Rica. So that is very exciting, but it's now in the kind of logistical part of packing up our whole life, trying to figure out how to get our cat across an international border. So there's a whirlwind going on, man.
Yeah, who'd have thought? Issues with cat travel. What's it been like for you working with your partner? Yeah, because some people say it's the best thing, some people struggle with it. How's that been for you? Because Chloe is working on Hero 100 with you, right? And Warrior 100.
Yes. Yeah, right. We've been building the 100 days out together. Beautiful and challenging. I mean, half the time you can't even separate those. It's actually revealing to me. I already kind of knew this, but it's certainly revealing to me how much of a kind of lone wolf work archetype I am. Like for so many years, it's just been me, myself behind the computer. Like, yes, I've worked with people, but all my work has always been, on my own time, in my own way, done how I want it. And man, entering into a work dynamic where we can literally sit across from each other and talk this through, it's been revealing, and it's been tough for me because there's a part of me that wants to open into deeper collaboration, but almost doesn't even have like the skill set for that yet, or the communication techniques for it yet. But at the same time, we also get a very, very tight feedback circle, right? Because we live together, we go to sleep together. So Yeah, we can give praise and critique really quickly, and it helps us level up just day by day rather than week by week or month by month. So beautiful and challenging initiation.
Yeah, wow, that sounds great. Over the years that I've known you, I've noticed a pattern with you is like you often have sort of like acute cycles of being interested in specific things, like that maybe I'm unexpected about. So like mace training, maybe an example of that, or like tea meditation, right? There's like often this like new phase, this new area that you're tinkering with, experimenting with, practicing serious play with, if you want to use the newsletter and blog, which is like a core philosophy of yours. What have you been playing with seriously, like recently? What is your areas of interest in that way at the moment?
Oh, amazing. Yeah, this one is actually really, really top of mind for me lately because, I mean, we are on the precipice of the new year, very much in the resolution season, also starting to think about what one of the challenges in the Hero 100 is a personal ritual, something you add into your life and do every day. So I've been really thinking about that. But just to add a bit of context, I'm actually releasing a post about this tomorrow because it's been so exciting for me. There's this guy named Jesse Itzler I've started listening to a lot. I absolutely love his philosophy, his view on life, but he introduced to me this concept called the misogi, which he frames as like every year you should do something so big and so challenging that it sets the tone for your entire year. Right? Another framing of this is like, you should be able to look back on your year and just be like, this was the year I did X. Like I did this. It was this thing. For him, I watch these guys more than I actually do it, but for him, it's been like ultra marathons, 50-mile, 100-mile races. He's like, 2020, I did this. 2021, I did this. I say all of this because I was like, I always fall into the overcommitted, under-delivering trap, always doing way more than I probably should be. And so I'm really trying to lean the other way. We were also speaking a couple days ago about Essentialism and what that book is currently doing to my psyche. I say all of this. The thing I am wanting to actually commit to for the Hero 100, commit to next year, and commit to for myself is actually yoga. I've been really reinvigorated in currently actually the physical practice of yoga. I actually really got into yoga from the more metaphysical, philosophical part of it, which is part and parcel with my life. Much more philosophical, conceptual, academic than I am physical, embodied practice. But yeah, the thing I am playing with the most, the thing I'm studying the most, and the thing I really want to like just go in on over the next year is actually yoga.
And what does that look like when you say go in on? Does that mean like just a daily practice or attending classes or becoming a teacher? What does that mean for you to go all in on it?
Oh, actually a little bit of everything. One of the things that I've come across that it's actually really easy to overlook in yoga philosophy, I brushed over it really quickly. There's actually, if you read some of the thinkers, if you read some of the yogis in the space, they actually make a recommendation of timing for the practice. The recommendation that they make is sunrise, or if you can't do sunrise, sunset. The idea being like it's essentially a transition time in the day, and yoga is a transitionary process from essentially the external to the internal. I was like, all right, I'm actually gonna pay attention. I'm actually gonna do that. So the first way that taking it seriously looks is my ritual for the Hero 100 is going to be a sunrise yoga routine. I did sunrises the first time, just actually getting up, and it was phenomenal. It was really hard to actually do the kind of discipline of getting up at that time every day. But man, so part of taking it seriously is I want a daily practice of it. The second part of taking it seriously is it's kind of painful and frustrating to admit this, but I have had a teacher training sitting at like 36% completion on my computer for like 3 years now. I'm pretty sure I did it like right in the middle of the first wave of lockdowns in COVID. I was like, look, whatever, we're going to be locked down. I'm going to do something with my time. And then of course, here we are several years later and it's still sitting there. So I both want to achieve an actual milestone by getting through that.
Yeah.
And actually just ingrain it more into a daily practice.
Wow. Sounds awesome. Yeah, that sounds brilliant. I wasn't expecting that, but that sounds really good. And I love that idea of finding like an epic big goal for the year. That is just, as soon as you said that, I was like, yes, that sounds so good to me. And when you were talking about essentialism, which we're going to come back to like in more depth a little bit later, but the idea of essentialism is sort of focusing on the essential few instead of getting caught up with the trivial many, right? It's like a form of minimalism. A lot of us at the beginning of the year like to focus on like the 35 books that we want to read, right? And it's like, why don't you choose 3 books, 3 movies, 3 video games, 3 habits, 3 like goals, right? Just like a few things and just aim at doing those. But choose the key is choose the right ones. You know, like what are 3 books that you could read this year, for example, that you've been putting off for a long time, you know, but you just know it's something in your heart says like, if you just read these 3 books that you've been putting off reading, it's going to change your perspective, right? Because I'm a culprit for just coming up with like the 50 books a year at the beginning of the year and trying to read one a week. Yep. So I'd like to take a little bit of inspiration from Seneca. And, you know, he's famous for recommending, he didn't come up with it, but I think he made it famous, the idea of the nightly review, right? So looking back over your day, what is something that you did well? What is something that perhaps you didn't do so well? And what is something that you would like to do better tomorrow? But I'd like to extend this to like the year view, right? So we can just take a look at your last year. I know it might be hard to remember everything, but let's just say like, what is the thing you're most proud of? Or the thing you're happy about? You can choose a couple if you like, that you're like, yeah, damn, I'm glad that I did that. I'm glad I acted in that way, or I'm glad that I created this thing. Like, what is the win for the last year for you? 2023.
Oh, I had like my initial answer come up, and then I had like the real answer follow that very quickly afterwards. Super frustrating. Yeah, hopefully this lands without too much background context, but the thing I think I'm actually most proud of myself for doing this year is really maybe having the courage to look at a very deeply ingrained pattern in my personality, which might be best summarized as something like the martyr archetype. The martyr being, you know, the one who always takes on everything, who always falls on the sword first, who always says that they'll do it, kind of has residue of people pleasing, yes man tendencies. And I had gotten feedback in my life from people I respect, from Chloe, my partner, about this before, but I kind of like shrugged it off. It got to a point this year that I actually either couldn't ignore it or was finally willing to face it. And honestly, it was painful. It was really painful to look at because I don't know, it really felt like it was demonstrating some layer of self-love that actually hadn't been accessed before. That like I was and still am, like it's still something I'm really trying to reorient around, but I'm very good and very quick to show up for other people, but often at the expense of myself. at the expense of my own health, of my stress levels, of my satisfaction, of my work-life balance. Like it all fits kind of under that martyr archetype. And honestly, I think the way this kind of landed is like, what would I be most happy 10 years from now that happened this year? And honestly, it's probably looking at that. Like I'm really proud of the 100 days and the experiences that we built there. But I think over the next 5, 10, 20 years, I think actually taking a really hard look at myself and making some difficult decisions around, how to take care of myself, how to love myself more, how to put myself first, is really important. So probably that.
Wow. Yeah, that's epic. And I'm sure there are a lot of people listening to this now that maybe have to relate to that as well. You know, working hard and showing up for others at the sacrifice of themselves. I'm actually reading a book right now, and the topic is on being a caretaker. And that's something that a lot of people fall into as well. Just sort of like, you know, like caring for others is like becomes your job in relationships and the destructiveness of that. Okay, that's really beautiful. What about something that there's no guilt associated with this ideally or shame, but it's sort of like, you know, like I could, that wasn't ideal. Like that's something an area of improvement, let's say, something that you've maybe a failure or something that you could learn from.
Yeah, I mean, it's related because all of these things are so. It's almost reasonable to say they're not even like parts of my personality. It's like they're the vast majority of my personality. Part of the realization and the exploration and the discovery of this kind of pattern and this kind of archetype was actually the way. So the long and short answer I'm trying to get to is essentially the thing that, I really look back on and I see as an opportunity or I'm frustrated about is like real overextension, like real overcommitment. But the reason it's coming up for this answer is because I can see much more clearly now how it actually prevents me, or maybe it's actually a safety mechanism from actually showing up fully for the people that I care about and for the things that I care about. And so it's actually now just become this lens of like, oh yeah, this is why I don't show up for my friends the way I want to. This is why I don't talk to my family as much as the way I want to, because I'm either too distracted, too focused on kind of worky, projecty stuff. And it's either an unwilling distraction or a safety mechanism from like fear of, I don't even know. Fear of like, am I not good enough for these guys? Should they be spending their time with other people? But, I think it's actually one of the things I value most, strangely, in myself and in other people is when you can tell that someone is really like showing up for it. Like there's just something beautiful of full commitment, your total energy, your full being going into something. And I just have really come to terms with how or the way I have set my life up is actually keeping me from showing up, from my partnership, my relationship, the teams that I work with, the people I work with, the things I say I care about, including my own like goals and rituals and habits and stuff. And so that is hard to like pin that down on like a single action, but I think that's kind of the point. When I zoom out on the year, it's just like, oh man, this isn't only affecting me, right? That might be the way to say it. It's not that this affects me. It also affects my family, my friends, people I work with, things I care about. And that hurts.
And based on these two things, something you did well, an area you can improve on, have you made like an internal commitment to yourself for the next year that's to come? Something that you're just more mindful of, or something that you want to start practicing with?
Yeah. So one of the really pointed, I started talking to people about this pattern. I started talking to ChatGPT about this pattern. I started reading a whole bunch about this. And one of the things that came up actually across the board was one of the problems that the martyr archetype has is actually an inability to set boundaries. And I'd always kind of laugh that off. Because actually there's a way it still exists in me. I was just talking about this a couple of weeks back. Like, the way boundaries have always felt for me is essentially a sign of weakness. Where it's like, you're just not strong enough to handle all of this, so you need a boundary.
Yeah.
And oh my God, dude. So, there's so many things wrong in that, but that was the honest way that I felt, where it's just like, oh, you're just not capable enough to do all these things, and you just don't have your own solid foundation to, handle all the requests of you, handle people, asking a lot of you. So maybe the theme for this year, the intention for sure, this actually relates to the essentialism stuff, is just essentially saying no. Essentially reclaiming time. And it can be small ways, right? Trying to cut meetings from my calendar. It's also bigger things too, like saying no to entire projects. Even saying no just to things so that I have free time. Not even so that I can replace it with other stuff, just for actual unstructured free space in my life. So yeah, the change, and it feels like part of the healing step is actually both learning about setting up and enforcing boundaries, emotional boundaries, energetic boundaries, time boundaries, like just all of it. Because I don't think there's ever been an actual moment in my life where I've done that, which sounds weird to say, but yeah, I don't really have examples I can point to, and that, if anything, is just a signal of like, that is where the work is to be done. So.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's a really, really good one. That's a really, really, really good one. So yeah, we've kind of mentioned a few times already Essentialism, but do you want to talk a little bit about your experience so far of reading that book and how it's impacting the way that you're thinking?
Yeah, I think it's just coming at a very good time contextually for me. I mean, like some background context, I think I know that the actual catalyst in my life that really got me on the path of whatever you want to call it, growth, self-improvement, healing, self-mastery, that whole space, it was actually minimalism. Like, I started reading the Minimalist blog by JFM and Ryan and doing some of their challenges. I was in university at the time, and so every time I would go back to my family's house for summer break or for winter break, I would pack up all my stuff and I would use it as a way to jettison everything. Like anything that didn't make its way back out of the luggage was just let go of. And it was the first time I actually had this like embodied, like visceral example in front of me of doing something and feeling substantially better after it. Like so much more mental clarity, so much more appreciation for the things in my life. And then minimalism just, honestly, it's just grown and evolved. Got very into Zen, got very into some of the Eastern religions, which have minimalism probably as both the way they operate and the outcome of how they operate. And so, yeah, all of this actually kind of led, I think it's why I've put the book off for so long, because it felt like it led to this kind of arrogance where it's like, dude, I already know all of this. Like, what is this thing actually going to teach me? But whatever. So I picked it up, and it really just, it's really been, I mean, the way I would like summarize the thesis, and I think you nailed it as well, is like learning really how to be disciplined in the process of saying no to just the trivial everything to make room and energy for the absolute essential few Because one of the things it's really highlighted for me so far is, again, I had a decade plus in minimalism, both with relationships, with physical possessions, with commitments. But it felt like I was actually getting rid of extra stuff so that I could just keep saying yes to everything that came up for me.
Mm-hmm.
This is the flip side of the martyr thing, right? Like, oh, I just got to get rid of the extra stuff so I can keep saying yes. Look at this opportunity and let's go talk to this person. Let's go out and do this and let's go here and do that. It was still never a discipline in the sense of like a way of study. And that is just really landing for me. I think maybe I'm at the time in my life. I think I've built enough of my own skill set. I really know myself enough and I know about the things I care enough that I'm really starting to see very clearly how putting 10% of my energy into 10 different things versus putting 100% of my energy into like one thing is really hurting me. And it's really hurting the quality of work that I can do. It's hurting how I can show up for relationships. So it is just really, really pointed in that fact and just making that like egregiously apparent to me. And yeah, so I'm super thankful for it.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's nicely said. And for me as well, essentialism is not just a set of ideas, it's a practice. So even though I'm familiar with the ideas of essentialism, I can still find myself falling off track and becoming someone who's not an essentialist. And then it's like, oh, okay, I need to sit down and create space and go through all of the thought processes and ask questions like, if I only had 3 hours a day to do what I wanted to do, what would I do with those 3 hours? Like the week ahead, what are the absolute most important things for me to do this week? That like, if I could only do these things, like I'd be happy with them. What are the hobbies or things that I want to study the most? Because I fall prey to trying to do too much at once. I want to have 10 books on the go at one time. And with self-care as well, there's some funny Instagram reels that are going around where people are parodying people that like to practice different self-help practices, such as, I wake up at 5 a.m. and do 25 minutes of a cold ice bath, and then I do a sauna, and then I do weights, and then I do like fast, and it's kind of like, okay, the world is becoming a bit crazy with the whole self-care thing. And people are doing like a little bit of everything in a way. And then they get a bit anxious if they miss one of those things. But then if you actually look at the masters, they usually just go all in on one thing, so you're choosing yoga to be that thing for this year. Find an advanced yogi or an advanced meditator or an advanced ice bath practitioner or an advanced breathwork practitioner. They will usually have way better insights and understanding than someone who's doing like all of them at once. Have you noticed that? Like the person who's doing like a bit of everything kind of like stays the same, but just gets a mood boost. The person that goes all in on one thing usually like has some form of deep transformation. I think David Goggins pointed this when he talks about doing the ultra marathons, and how like one long run is like years of therapy. You get to know yourself way more in that dark, deep like place inside your own psyche, than if you were to kind of do like a bit of this and a bit of that and mix it up. So yeah, after reading the book, are there any things that stand out to you as being like, oh, these are absolutely essential components of my life? Like I can't be letting these things go.
Oh man. Yeah, there's so much good stuff here. One of the biggest things that is coming up for me, and it's been building, right? It was also getting up with the sunrise was also my ritual the first time we ran the Hero 100. But there's a there's a symbolism to that in me that actually feels very important, which is I'm actually going to put my own interests in my own life as the first thing that happens in my day. Because part of my whole way of operating for a long time has just been, I essentially just wake up and like get to work, right? Sure, I might like go for a walk or make some coffee or something, but at the end of the day, the way it really looks is like wake up and essentially start giving my energy towards other things. And I've been fortunate enough, and actually I think this is the thing that has made this pattern go on for so long. I've been fortunate enough that the things I work on, I absolutely love. Like I do deeply enjoy just where my energy actually goes. But yeah, seeing viscerally how little of it is actually going to me as a priority was really eye-opening. So there's an actual like, there's some fundamental relationship I'm seeing between how my day actually begins and how that actually reflects priorities in my life. And it's like, dude, if I can't do a morning for myself without work, like what kind of life am I actually making for myself? And really, really coming to terms with that. There are a couple smaller ways. I think another way to view essentialism, or perhaps the way it's surfacing for me, is what are you willing to let burn? Like what fires are you willing to let just continue because you actually are over here? Yeah, and there's smaller ones like, I write a newsletter, I write Serious Play, and I've been sitting with that of like, well, can I actually change? Can I decrease the subheading of essentialism? This one is actually, again, it resonated with me so deeply because it's a philosophy I appreciate so much in the philosophy already, but he says less but better, like fewer things at much higher quality. And I mean, I've already gone through and I'm like, so what if I actually committed to only sending my newsletter once every 3 months? And I just made that thing like an actual like experience where someone was actually sitting there like, oh my God, it's the 3rd month. This thing is going to come. I'm so excited. And actually that felt both freeing because I was like, oh, well then I don't have to publish at any level of consistency. It's more controlled, but actually it made me feel so good because I was like, yeah, those would actually be substantially better than what I put out right now. Like I actually want to do something at greater quality. So all to say, I think there are a lot of ways it's currently rippling, both from like loftier priority things just to also like, here's how I plan my day, the things I want to do. And saying no to a lot of things. I looked back about this time last year, I released a big post called Reclaiming Healthy Ambition. And it had, in classic EB fashion, it has like, I'm going to do like 7 different things this year. You watch me. It's going to be amazing. Super high energy. Most of them are incomplete right now, right? Most of them are just sitting there staring back at me like, you thought you were going to do this. So it's also perhaps the biggest thing is permission to say no, or like permission just to like really defer something where it's like, I can get to this later in my life, period. Or maybe never. Maybe I'll find out by leaving it that I actually just don't even care about it that much at all. Both of which are actually fairly good outcomes.
One of the issues I think with long-term goals and planning is that we have no idea what the person we are in the future is going to be, like what they're going to think. So for you to create the next year of goals, what you should really do is be able to have a conversation with EB in 12 months from now and to negotiate what works for both of you. But you can't do that, right? So you're like choosing like all of these things that EB in 12 months might be like, why are you doing that? I don't want to do that anymore. I have these other things that I'm interested in. Right? And that's one of the issues as well with, doing a pros and cons list with something like marriage, like, should I get married? Shouldn't I get married? the version of you that is married like 2 years from now is not going to have the same pros and cons list as the person you are writing that pros and cons list now. So it's like you can't give too much trust in that list. And I think having like shorter time frames is a bit better for that reason. But I'd like to just talk a little bit about the Hero 100 experience, because you yourself and the participants of these programs are committing to 100 days of something. And forgetting the individual practices, what has that been like just to commit to something and then to experience what I'm talking about, where maybe your personality and your tastes and your passions may change or fluctuate in that 100 days? And I guess it's like a real exercise of integrity at that point, where it's like, maybe I'm not as passionate right now about meditation or something like that, but I've committed to it, so I'm going to keep showing up for it. So what are some of your reflections on that element of the program?
Yeah, so we make people essentially commit to 6 different things. It takes about an hour a day to do. It's a cold shower, meditation session, journaling, item elimination, so getting rid of something every day, a personal ritual, so whatever that is, wake up early, practice a language, and then we're doing an abstinence challenge this time, so just stop doing something. Like you're really pointing at the thing that is more exciting to me. I'm happy to wax poetic all day about the actual value of each of those. I call them disciplines. Like each of those disciplines is deeply valuable for an individual, but the true power of the experience that I both felt and that I believe in is just watching yourself go through the 100-day commitment. Like that journey brings up so much by design that is actually hard to get, I think, at smaller timescales. Yeah. One of the ones that comes up for a lot of people fairly early on is overcoming perfectionism. Because there's a moment, maybe it's day 6, maybe it's day 64, where you actually miss your first day, or you miss your first weekend because you had a previous commitment or a wedding or something like that. And just because you're already in the container, because you have the intention for the 100 days, and because you have practices like meditation, like journaling, like your ritual, you just can't avoid watching this narrative in your head of like, oh yeah, I've done it, may as well just give up. But you're immediately also presented with the opportunity of like, God, man, it was one day. Or maybe it was even just one practice. Like we just missed one practice. Is this really that big of a deal? But I'm fairly convinced that unless you have the structure and that container and that shared intention, it's very easy to miss those moments of like, wow, perfectionism was really central to me. Or negotiating with yourself, right? There's not a lot of room for negotiation in the Hero 100. It's like you are committing to do these 6 things every day for 100 days period. We even have like the minimum level of success. Like you have to take a 3-minute cold shower. It is a 20-minute meditation session. If you want to do more, be my guest. But again, you now have this vehicle that actually surfaces to you like, oh, it's 8 o'clock. I'm kind of tired. Maybe we can just pass today. And yeah, honestly, the opportunity to see that, because it really gets you down. It gets you down to those much more like core personality justifications or quirks or characteristics. Like, I actually think for me and for several others, there was one of the biggest experiences I had a few times in the first Hero 100 was actually giving myself permission not to complete a day. Like, bro, don't worry. Like, take a break. We're in this for a long game. You've got like 2 months left. Like, recover, rest, whatever you need, reorient yourself, and let's get back better. And just because you're missing a day, because you're not going to get that check, because the streak's going to be broken, you actually have to make that choice like very, very consciously. And that was freeing for some people, right? Oh, okay, right. I can give myself permission to take a break, to not aim for this. I don't have to go so hard. But at the same time, I'm going to get back at it tomorrow, right? So just learning a lot of this, like what healthy discipline can look like, what personal integrity means, how to honor your commitments to yourself, how to honor your commitment to the group, right? This is a group experience, and that dynamic plays into it a bit. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things, but I mean, we literally call them the Hero 100, the Warrior 100 for a reason. Like the 100 days is very much, I think in many ways more important than the actual challenges you do each and every day.
Yeah. An idea that I had for you just now as you were talking about this, whether you implement it as a practice or like a supplement would be, down to you. But schedule in some kind of self-coaching ritual where, because it's that idea, like Sam Harris says, wisdom is the ability to follow your own advice. A lot of people doing Hero 100 are probably really good at giving other people counsel and guidance, but then fall prey to things like perfectionism themselves. But if you sit down and you're like, hey, I'm going to coach myself for 10 minutes now on today and kind of coach myself on what I should do tomorrow, you'd almost always find the advice of like, hey, it doesn't matter that you've missed a day today, right? Like it's like in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't make a big deal. Like what counts is that we recommit tomorrow. But just having that time where you're guiding yourself, you're almost like writing a letter to yourself to kind of give yourself some guidance. There's something super powerful about that, because like a lot of CBT journaling is basically that you have these different kind of setups where you write down your automatic thoughts and your distortions, but it ends with find a more balanced perspective, find a more balanced version of that thought. So when someone feels like, oh, like I've messed up, there's no point going on. Well, what is a more balanced version of that thought? They'd be able to give that advice to someone else in the team, but we struggle big time to give it to ourselves, It's crazy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I love that completely. That is tried and true for me as well. That Sam Harris line, you can do so much work just off of that. It's really incredible.
Yeah. And I think Marcus's meditations, even though it's this like widely regarded masterpiece in the self-improvement philosophy literature, how many people do you know that have written a self-improvement book for themselves? Like none. Right? It's like it's there. Like just do that. You don't need to buy one. Just write your own for you. You'll be amazed what you find. Do you do much journaling at all at the moment? Or like kind of writing practices or anything like that?
On the best of days. Yeah. And I mean, it's part of the hope. Like I believe in the actual challenges we put in the 100 days, but in both of them. And I mean, the journaling sessions in the Hero 100 are there for a reason. It's one of the other things. I mean, selfishly and generously, I also wanted to design these experiences for myself, because it was just like, if I had infinite time, if I had infinite money, like how do I actually just want to spend a good average day? And I was like, do. Journaling's always one of them. Meditation's one of them. Doing something I care about is one of them. And that's the other thing about the 100 days is I've heard from a few people, like that length of time is also needed to actually have it become a normal part of your life, where it goes from the really subtle but really important shift that happens is it goes from this is something I have to essentially make myself do every day to, it now feels weird when I don't do it. That is a really subtle but really powerful distinction. And so, yeah, the journaling practice has stayed. I mean, we had a study section in the Warrior 100 as well. So, I mean, I spent, 200 days this year, just straight up, day in, day out, doing 20 minutes of journaling, and it's honestly amazing.
Wow.
I think the one that sticks for me, like I love a good prompt. I love when there's a really like incisive or cutting question, but honestly, just sitting down and, I feel X, I feel happy today because of this. Like really just stream of consciousness journaling is unbelievably underrated in our day and age. Like just getting things out of your head. Like, cause half of the anxious, awkward thoughts that you have consistently would actually go away if you just wrote them down. Like literally just, you don't have to refer back to them. They don't have to be wise or intelligent. They don't even have to make sense. Like just write it out. And it's such a cathartic process that, on my best of days, journaling is a cornerstone.
You said there's a lot of power in just getting stuff out of your head, right? But when you journal, you're getting stuff out of your head, but it's in a structured way, which is a very important difference between like rambling at someone, right? That might help a bit, but by journaling, whether you like it or not, you have to follow kind of certain rules. Like, you have to write in thoughts. You have to do some kind of correct spelling, right? Some kind of sentence structure. Even if you do it very sloppily, you are still kind of following some kind of structure. And I think that's one of the reasons why expressive writing for trauma is shown to be very effective. It's because you can't help when you write about something to make it coherent and to kind of give it some kind of narrative and therefore make sense of it in a way that when we're rambling and emotional, it just doesn't work like that, right? When you write something, you're turning it into a story. You're making it ordered.
Yeah, and it sounds so trivial, but when you write, you actually have to essentially declare how you feel about the thing, right? Because when it's in your head, it can live as like feelings in your body, images, just strange. Half the time it's jumbled and doesn't even make sense. But, if you start writing like, oh yeah, I had an argument with my brother today and it makes me feel like, you actually have to pick a word to continue the sentence. Like, and that can be profoundly revealing. Like, do you feel angry? Do you feel disappointed? Do you feel insecure? Like, the word that actually comes out of your head there is extremely revealing, because you might look back at that line and be like, I didn't realize this was bothering me so much. Or actually, oh, I guess that wasn't actually that big of a deal. But it's because writing actually, it sounds silly. It forces you to actually pick words. And man, that can reveal as much about the situation as it does about yourself. It's incredible.
And also, let's not forget that people like to talk about technology, right? Like an iPhone. If you could go back, like 100 years and show someone a phone, they'd think it was magic and they'd blow their mind. If you went back 20,000 years and you showed someone a book and you showed them that you could read from it, that would also blow their mind. Like, writing is a technology that hasn't always existed, right? We've created it. But we take it for granted now. But like, it is arguably more of a magnificent technology than even the coolest piece of tech, because civilization is founded on it. No businesses could exist without language, the written word. Civilization will collapse.
Actually, I don't even think it's helpful. There's something the slowness of writing is actually a feature and not a bug. It's not an obstacle to be overcome. It's actually an opportunity, because you are literally sitting with each sentence and each word for so much longer. Like, I can type so fast that I can barely even think. Like, thinking like slows me down when I type. And if you're actually trying to do a level of self-awareness activity or process something, like, you're just half in, half out. You're not even fully paying attention to it. Or like voice dictation, like it's literally not the same as when you are just sitting there word by word, letter by letter, like really sitting with the thing. So yeah, I actually think written journaling is part of why it is powerful, is because it is so slow It is so intentional. It requires much more presence, much more just conscious effort on your part. Like that's a feature. That's a benefit of doing that. That's not like, oh, this is slow. I wish it could be done faster. Like, no, it's part of the point.
Yes. I also think there's an overlap with reading as well. So a long time ago, I bought a few books on speed reading. I started practicing it, the different techniques, and it was useful. It kind of helped me learn how to skim a little bit. And it was just interesting to kind of learn about reading and like the different methods of reading and sub-vocalization and things like that. But I think what would have benefited me more was a book or a course on slow reading, but there aren't many of those about. Because when you find that like dense philosophical paragraph and you're used to just reading quickly, you're just going to miss everything. That's one of the big reasons I started the Stoic Handbook, similarly to you, selfishly, because I was like, I want to be able to really look sentence by sentence at the Stoic texts. You know, I want to have a reason to do that. And so I just started taking the Enchiridion and kind of really thinking about it and opening it up and expanding on it. And I still need to work on that because I think it's, the ability to really look at a sentence and question it and have dialogue with it and speak to the author is like a really high level skill. Before this conversation, you mentioned one of the things you're interested in at the moment is the topic of rereading. So would you be able to explain what you mean? Because we haven't actually spoken about that yet.
Oh yeah. I know at some point in our relationship over the past few years, we have spoken about this because it's so good. There are two quotes maybe we can start this off with. This is a cheeky take on an old Bruce Lee quote, but I just wrote this the other day. It's like, I don't fear the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks one time. I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. Same thing with books. Yeah. Same thing with books, honestly. The other way to frame this is there's another quote that's like, no man can enter the same river twice because he's not the same man and it's not the same river. Same thing with books, particularly very profound books that have stood the test of time. Like you will literally always get something different from it. And it's actually funny. It's really interesting if you go back to a book that you yourself have previously like highlighted or underlined or like made notes on. Cause you look at some of the highlighted chunks and you're like, I don't care about this at all. The important stuff is on the next page. Like it just lands so differently because you are in a different context. Maybe you've already metabolized a lot of the early stuff that you got from it and you're ready for a different perspective, a richer take. And so, yeah, this is super fresh for me because I just released a post about this literally yesterday on the 6 books that I reread every year as like, they're kind of like pilgrimage for me. And 3 of them, are the Stoic, I call them the Stoic trilogy, the Stoic trifecta, Meditations, Letters from a Stoic, and the Enchiridion. Mm-hmm. The other few for me are the Tao Te Ching. It's like the Bible of Taoism. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which is like the Bible of yoga. And there's another book that digs into the Tao Te Ching a bit more, but those things are like, to me, they're like the view from above exercise, essentially. They're like moments in my life where I actually pull far, far, far back and just really rest in a much broader perspective. Like, what am I doing here? Do I like my life? Do I feel like I'm putting my energy into things that I care about? Because all of those books in some way, they're all essentially like, to use a crude term, they're all essentially like Bibles of a school of thought.
Yeah.
Right? The Stoic trilogy is all Stoicism. The Tao Te Ching is Taoism. The yoga one is yoga philosophy. But it's all just like, they're all essentially like, how should one conduct themselves in life? How do you live in alignment with your values? How do you bring yourself into coherence with nature? And Yeah, I return to them like an annual pilgrimage because I get so much from them every time. It's insane, actually. Like it's just truly incredible. So yeah, if there are books that really speak to someone, like you should absolutely revisit them because you'll just keep getting more and more. They're just absolutely infinite in the depth that you can go and in the ways that they can speak to you. And yet, I feel like we do the exact opposite. I feel like most of modern culture, most of like Bookstagram is just like, yeah, run your numbers up, right? It's a kind of like literary materialism. Like, how many books can I get? But like, dude, I want to talk to the person who just has their core 4 books and they've been reading them for 3 decades. Like, why? What speaks to you about them? So yeah, it's just a very important practice in my life.
I also love the idea of seeing books as like energy fields in a way. So instead of seeing them as just like nuggets of knowledge, I kind of see it more like, I've learned this a lot from reading parenting books, right? Because I'm not necessarily reading parenting books for like the tips. I'm reading them so some like parenting expert can just put a hand on my shoulder and be like, we got you. We understand. We are there with you. And that is so soothing just to feel like understood. Like someone is like telling you what's going on in your own life, like perfectly. And you're like, thank you. I'm not going crazy. Like this is actually normal. This is all part of the plan. And maybe you read Marcus Aurelius and he's talking about betrayal or meeting like ignorant people. And you're like, you got it too. Like, thank you. Like, I appreciate that. And you're handling it well. Like, nice. So it's almost like this energetic exchange that can happen that can be very therapeutic, that goes beyond just, oh, here's some knowledge for you.
Oh, I absolutely love that. There's a parallel here to what we were talking about earlier, right? You brought up Goggins and how long runs can mold you. I have this. We might have spoke about this last time. I have this term I love called the discipline of surrender, which is basically just like, if you actually submit yourself to a practice, it will literally just mold you like a cookie cutter. Like it will just burn away the things that aren't aligned. It will give you the skills and wisdom that it has to teach. But it needs time to do that. It actually needs a depth of relationship with you to mold you in those ways. And so, yeah, like the 100 days and sitting with meditation, like I don't even care if you don't want to meditate. Do it for that long and it will mold you into something, I would argue, that is beautiful and positive and transformative. Staying with a school of thought for a long time will do the exact same. It will get into you. It will mold you. It will shape you. It will support you, right? The supportive hand on the shoulder. And honestly, books are the same thing. Like if you stuck with that piece for years and years and years, like it will actually support you, guide you, mold you, influence you, shape you in ways that are both obvious and extremely subtle. But it's all dependent on depth over time, like actually staying with those things. And yeah, if you're just, Blinkist speed reading, one after the other, or again, my classic thing of like pick up a practice, try it for 3 weeks, drop it, go on to the next shiny thing. Like you never actually get to access the true transformative potential that really is most dependent on time. Like it really just needs time to work on you and get into deep, like subconscious material. So yeah, it applies to books. It applies to practices. It applies to learning skills. Like surrender into it over time. And that is when you really do like very core, like fundamental change work.
What is your reading process? What does it look like? What does it look like when EP reads? The specifics of that.
Oh yeah. When I can, I try to get a physical book. I spend way too much time behind screens. I've been living in Argentina for a long time, so I can't actually do that. There aren't many English bookstores here, and the ones that do exist here don't have the books that I want to read. So yeah, highlighter in my hand when I can, but most of the time it's just on the Apple Books app. And the thing I try to do if I'm really trying to get something from the book is take notes along the way. I think the thing that's actually been most helpful for me is trying to write a reflection on it afterwards. Not really even necessarily like pulling back quotes or just like, and in chapter 4 they said this, but actually in your own words, like, what is this thing trying to tell me? What stands out to me most? How do I express this in my own terms? I mean, it's a kind of like basic stance of what would you do if you were actually trying to study the book?
Yeah.
Like if you're actually about to be tested on it, what would you do? Like, yeah, take notes, go back, highlight key terms, put it in your own words, space repetition, like come back to it. To be fair though, I've read far, far, far more books than the 6 that I come back to consistently, right? A lot of them aren't like that. And yeah, I mean, a lot of my reading is casual. If I'm being completely honest, it's time before bed, time between calls, time on flights. If there's something that really speaks to me, it's revisited and it's reflected on. That might be the way to say it.
Yeah, and what about audio books or like, do you ever do audios? Or just...
Honestly, never.
You never do audiobooks?
Never.
Interesting.
Literally never. I think it's because I don't actually listen to too many. I was listening to podcasts a lot a couple of years back, and I think it just got into me, or maybe it's just a self-awareness thing, but like when I'm listening to something, I'm doing other stuff and I'm only listening to it so I can like zone out of 2 things at the same time. And yeah, honestly, like the things I read, I actually want, like it just feels like actually reading, whether it's on a phone or on a book, is at least a level of engagement. It's at least the level of engagement I want. Because if I was just listening, I would be doing 8 other things and, I'd be rewinding 18 times. And yeah, it just feels like it hasn't landed.
Yeah, totally. So I listen to a lot of audiobooks, like a lot. And I think it depends what kind of lifestyle you have. But I think there are certain activities that can like lend themselves to listening to audiobooks without really impairing to a substantial degree. I don't think it's as good as reading a book, but it's like not terrible. And then you've got to turn the audiobook off when you're doing one of those like cognitively demanding tasks. And some people don't. And I'm like, I've learned the hard way. So if I'm just driving a road that I've driven like 1,000 times before, it's like I can listen to an audiobook. Right? If I'm walking like 10 minutes on a boring road, like I can listen to an audiobook and enjoy that audiobook. If I'm, like, I don't know, trying to go to the gym and do a weightlifting session while listening to an audiobook, not really. It's like too much stuff going on. So then I should turn it off and maybe switch to something like music or nothing at all. So I kind of pick and choose where I listen to them. And also not all books, I don't think all books work well. There are certain types of books that are more like, just get some like nice like tips and pointers, like I've already read Essentialism. Totally. So re-listening to that, just for like, I'm just going to remember some of the key points on audio, that would work well. Reading Friedrich Nietzsche's Will to Power on audiobook, probably not going to be so good, right? So it's like, right, like that's for reading. Very slowly. So I kind of think there's like a nuanced way of doing it, but I think it's great that you've made that commitment and you're like, I want to give my full attention to reading. I think that's admirable. Nice work.
Yeah. And dude, I totally agree. It's contextual. I don't have a car. Everything in my, like, I live in Argentina. Everything's 5-minute walkable. Like, I just don't have the extended, like, commute times. I listen to a lot of YouTube on my computer, behind my computer a lot. And then, yeah, for stuff like if I was doing yoga or something, or if I'm doing exercise, this is actually something I had to kind of train out of myself. But I actually don't want to be, I personally started to use things like podcasts as a way to kind of escape the sensation of, exercise or yoga stuff. And that actually I had to reorient. It's actually like, no, I want to be precisely in this. So I actually only do music or silence for stuff like that. So yeah, it's totally contextual, but yeah, no audiobooks for me.
Nice. I recently interviewed Dan Munro, who is very focused on honesty. And I did like another interview with him. I've done a few like, kind of bringing back the OGs to the podcast lately, and I'm really enjoying it. So I've spoken to Justin again, speaking to you, I've spoken to Dan. And these are actually conversations that I want to have, rather than, oh, I should speak to this person because it will help me grow the podcast. It's like, no, I actually want to talk to these people because I like talking to you, and, we always have a good rapport. So I'm privileged to be able to do that. But what is your view on honesty? I guess like Dan is very, very focused on honesty, like does not want to lie to his child about Santa Claus, and doesn't really think there are such things as pro-social lies. And he does ground that viewpoint in the idea of being powerful with your honesty and not weak, so like seeing honesty as something that you can do well or do badly, and to not be the type of person that's like abusive or mean or cruel or lacking empathy when being honest, right? So there's like a certain kind of responsibility that comes with honesty. So I just want to kind of like explain that part as well. But he's very focused on honesty. What is your view on honesty? Do you focus on it a lot? Do you ever think it's okay to tell little white lies? Like, what is your view there?
Oh man, I'm in the process of actually consciously trying to lean far more onto the extreme side of the spectrum of just, there is no option other than honesty. Because if I'm being honest, there's a cultural thing here, right? I was born and raised in Canada, and, Canadians are very polite. Chloe, my partner, actually said this to me once, and it actually shattered something in me because I had never heard it said this way. She was like, it was like an offhand cheeky comment, but it smacked me. She was like, and this is why you can never trust a Canadian, because they're so polite, because they will do whatever the polite thing is, not necessarily what the truthful thing is. And that actually smacked me, because this again, you can see there's roots in the martyr and the people pleaser part here of just like, oh yeah, I'm fine. Like, so yeah, I actually, unfortunately, I don't think I've had the biggest embrace of honesty, or perhaps the broadest definition of it in my life. But man, we just closed out the Warrior 100 like a month and a half ago. And one of the 4 challenges in that was this integrity audit, where we had people at the end of the day just straight up look at everything they did, their actions, their thoughts, their words. They're like, where was this out of integrity? Where were you lying? Whether by actively lying, like telling dishonesty, or by holding back the truth, and just really, really doing this audit every single day for 100 days straight. And yeah, I'm just strange timing for this call, because I actually just reread Lying by Sam Harris. Mm-hmm. It's not quite a book. It's like a kind of 50-page essay that he writes, which it seems like he shares almost the exact same stance as Dan, which is like, there is no acceptable case for lying. It actually erodes the foundations that civilization is built on. So Yeah, my stance now is at the conceptual level, I am totally sold on both the like individual, like warrior level integrity, like absolute truth at all costs, and the collective civilizational level of like, you cannot build a healthy collective on a foundation of lies, however big or however small. Like that's just, you just can't do that. And now I'm, trying to build the muscle and cultivate the skill of like, I'm going to be honest with how I feel, with feedback that I have to give. And yeah, it's awkward. It's really tough, particularly for me to be like, no, I'm not okay with this, or I don't have the energy for this, or what you said is really bothering me, or, that it's been really hard. The Warrior 100 was helpful to start with that, but yeah, so maybe a long way of saying, yeah, I am really consciously trying to get myself into the like absolute integrity, honesty at all cost.
Dan's book, The Naked Truth. I just want to shout out that book because that is an actual like 300 plus page book, not just like a 50-page essay. And he doesn't just talk about the value of honesty, but how we could actually become more honesty in the real world. Like the process that you're going to go through, some of the pitfalls and the mistakes, what it means to be honest, and like how to actually become this fully honest human being. He walks you through that in the book. I had one of my clients read that book recently, and it's not an understatement to say that it like shook his world completely upside down, to the point that it was like as if he did like a bunch of ayahuasca or something when he was reading that book, because he was just messaging me saying like, I'm fake. And he was just like, whoa, like he was just seeing all of the ways that he wasn't being real in the world, and that can be a wake up call.
Oh yeah, it's very bitter medicine for sure. One of the ways it started manifesting in me, or not manifesting, but one of the things that has opened me up to this a lot more is it feels like there's a part of why people are dishonest because they are just fundamentally afraid of reality, or like afraid of what the truth will do. And yeah, so we're in the, we're doing the study curriculum of the Warrior 100 on like courage and bravery and honor and integrity. I'm just like, man, am I actually just afraid of what will happen if I tell people my own truth? Like if I said no, or actually I don't care about this thing at all. Like I consider myself fairly willing to face the truth in various formats. And yeah, sometimes it's as simple and as difficult as actually just saying what you actually think and feel. So and it's actually yet another one of the disciplines that will mold you over time, is just an absolute commitment to speaking the truth. And you can always deliver the truth in a respectful manner. Like the argument that you're just going to become an asshole is not true. You can always do it with skill, but it will mold you over time. Yeah. Committing to just be absolutely honest to the best of your abilities.
Dan says that he had at one point like hundreds of friends. And then after he started being more honest, he probably ended up with 20 or 30 friends. But those friends were the real friends. And I think a lot of us are afraid of losing those friends and losing those relationships and right. And like losing those opportunities because we've usually created a world around not being fully honest, being a bit polite. Maybe there are people that have liked you, EB, because of that kind of Canadian culture, because you just like, you're agreeable and they like you because of that reason. And as soon as you start like telling them the truth, they're going to be like, what's your problem? And that's part of the process, right? You've got to just go with that.
Yeah. And it's the double-edged sword, right? Because while it's true that expressing your truth might cause you to lose people who don't actually resonate with that, you will never you will never let yourself truly connect. You'll not even let yourself. You'll never be able to truly connect with people because you will know that they're not actually connecting to you. They're connecting to the carefully constructed, slightly dishonest persona that you have expertly crafted for them. And so you actually keep yourself removed from life. So yeah, while you may not go through the pain of losing, potentially, you don't even know, maybe everyone will just like it, but potentially losing people, you'll also never get the true joy of people who respect you and love you for literally actually who you are. And that is robbing yourself of such a fundamental human experience. Like it's really a tragedy.
Yeah. Nicely put. I have a big question for you now. So I hope you're ready for this. What does self-mastery mean to you, and how do you measure your progress in it?
Oh, wow. Incredible. So the framing that came up is the ability to live by choice and not by chance. Maybe a different way to say it is something like your life is your own intentional creation rather than the chaotic, unconscious kind of pinball bouncing around from external forces or traumatic patterns from the past or constructed personas. Like you are actually the sovereign author of your existence, essentially. Measuring that is challenging. I think it's a kind of oh my God, there's something from Jung coming up in my head right now, which is this is going to be butchered, but it's something like you can never truly access the self. You only kind of circumambulate it, like you only kind of dance around it. It's like how self-mastery feels like how the sun actually moves through space and kind of pulls all the planets along with it. Like it's just this gravity that pulls it closer. So maybe measuring isn't the frame, but like a moving towards or a dancing with, because I think the thing that actually excites me most, I love that you brought this up. Self-mastery is my favorite thing right now, but I actually like it because it doesn't feel like a destination. It feels like a continued process. And I think insofar as you can be radically honest with yourself and actually identify to the best of your abilities, like, yeah, am I choosing this? Where is this coming from? What is the intention? Is this what I intended? I think you're well on your way.
Yeah, I really like that. And it's sort of this, I think, like people say, how do you know if you're in love, right? There's no measurement for that. People say you just know, right? And it's maybe there's a certain kind of flavor to being aligned where there's not much distance between your potential and your embodied experience, right? It's kind of like it kind of comes together. You're not going through life going, if only I was this like other person with this other life and with, with these other, it's just like the distance closes. And then there's a lot of alignment there. The Stoics would argue that self-mastery would be purely internal and based on the virtues. Like, can you exhibit virtue basically in all circumstances? Discipline, courage, fair kindness, practical wisdom. And they probably wouldn't be focused on like, hey, is your job the right job? Like that's a good sign if you've, got self-mastery or something. What do you think about that? The kind of the tension between the external and the internal when it comes to self-mastery.
The external world is only relevant insofar as it's an opportunity to use. Like, it's a vehicle, it's a tool, it's a technique. Like, it just does not. I don't quite want to say it does not matter. I will say that I wholeheartedly agree. Like, how I relate to self-mastery is an entirely internal process, because because it's an entirely individual process. It's not something that you can just say it's going to look the same for everyone else, which is actually why the external is almost irrelevant. Because for someone's flavor of mastery might be, going to a tea hut in Japan and they just become a tea master, right? For someone else, it might be becoming the greatest break dancer, like the Jabberwockies. I don't know if you know who the Jabberwockies are. They're this like breakdance group, and their mastery is actually getting like a dedicated show in Las Vegas. Like that might be their version of self-mastery. Like, and actually I think, maybe this is the framing. Your external world is kind of a lagging indicator of your own internal self-mastery. Like, the more you change yourself, the more you come into yourself, the more you welcome, embrace, and cultivate who you are, your world, the world around you, changes to reflect that, to honor that, to mirror that, essentially. So it's not that, the lagging indicator might be, I think, a better way that I think about it. But it's mostly just an opportunity.
A slightly contentious point, just to throw the spanner in the works here with this topic. In the spiritual space, you and I both kind of dabble in and create content within at times. There seems to be this idea that the external world is often a manifestation of the kind of garden that you're cultivating on the inside. And obviously there's a correlation, right? Like, if you think certain things and act in certain ways, it has an effect in physical reality. But then what comes up for me is, if you think through history, many great masters of different disciplines have been assassinated, murdered, like burned at the stake, right? And so, like, what comes up for you with that? Like, what is it, because they were clearly aligned, they were on the path of mastery. There was that guy, I can't remember his name, like, who kind of was the first person to kind of realize that the earth goes around the sun rather than everything else going around the earth, that, and I think they were executed for, like, oh my God, like, the earth is in the center of the universe, are you crazy? What comes up for you when I bring these individuals up?
Completely agree. The example that comes in my head immediately is, I don't know why it took me so long, but I just read Man's Search for Meaning like a month ago.
Nice.
Had never touched it yet. And in a roundabout way, he actually, I think Viktor Frankl and his stories in the concentration camps actually demonstrate kind of the point that I think I'm pointing to. Like, it's not, these guys were in some of the most just desolate, disgusting circumstances that a human could be put in, literally. And literally the thing, it truly demonstrated the character of the individual, how they showed up for that. Like, some people were actually able to whatever, remain calm, be a support for other people, just keep it together, right? And like that's kind of what I point to when, the external situation doesn't matter, because you always, this might even be the essence of the Search for Meaning book as well, is it's just like, you can choose how to respond to the world and the circumstances that are in front of you. That is like perhaps your most like fundamental freedom as a human being, It's like you have the power of choice in front of you. And yeah, so I don't, yeah, I also have I also have a mild allergy to the kind of, yeah, the manifesty, create your own reality, like everything you see is a fictional illusion in front of you. I have a slight allergy to that, but like even, so it's you have the power of choice and your choices have consequences. I think that's how I would respond to this, because, you know, when I make the decision to bring my life into alignment with my values, at some point, 3, 6 months, a year down the line, a lot of things in my external world look different. Half the time the work I'm doing looks different. Certainly the possessions that I have around me look different. The way I spend my time looks different. So like, that's what I mean by like the ripple effect, and how it actually, the world kind of lags behind where you're coming from. And the art of changing where you're coming from is essentially the process of self-mastery. Like what state do you want to come from? Because you can essentially choose it irrespective. Like the mastery part of self-mastery is, can you continue to choose despite X? You know, despite being in an argument, despite losing your job, despite winning the lottery, like, can you continue just to be the arbiter of your experience, regardless of the situations around you?
Yeah, wow. I think referencing Man's Search for Meaning was perfect. Like, that was like really on point reference there. And yeah, I think like Marcus Aurelius, he has this line, to bear misfortune nobly is good fortune. So like the ability to handle anything life gives you is good luck. Yeah. And Seneca says something to the effect of, the wise person wants nothing to be different from how it is. And it's kind of brings up, you know, the Matrix. I love the Matrix. Morpheus says to Neo when they're in the dojo, Neo is panting, like collapsing, his heart rate is through the roof. And Morpheus is like, you think that's air you're breathing? And it's like, and it's almost like the Stoics are saying, like, you think the external world is giving you like happiness? Like, really? Oh dear. Okay. Like, all right. Yeah. It's kind of like, but nobody wants to accept that. People want to cling to this idea that they're out of breath. You know, it's like, there's this other paradigm that can exist if you let it. But yeah, that was a great reference. I think that's also a good place to sort of wrap up all the main kind of threads of this conversation and tie it all together with something that's more future focused. And that is, where do you go from here? You know, like, what are you going to be working on? You've already mentioned the next iteration of Hero 100, or was it Hero 102, the second one? Yeah. Can you give some details about that? And also like whatever else you're going to be working on in the coming weeks?
At the present moment, that is the current focus. There's something about the 100 days structure that feels like really pure from my end. I get to avoid a lot of like the teacher-student dynamic, almost the guru-disciple dynamic that can happen in some of these containers. It's given me so much, and I know at this point that if there is something giving me a lot, then it's like I just feel onto something. So, and also, you know, to come full circle to close this off, you know, in the spirit of essentialism, in the spirit of saying no to the many, to really invest on the few, I am really trying to put my focus on the 100 days, putting it in front of people, and really just actually making it something that is truly, truly, yeah, transformative for people. And it's quite beautiful, because like I have no shortage of things I still need to work on, right? We spoke to many of them in this conversation, like still a lot of people pleasing, still a lot of martyr tendency, still a lot of boundary setting. the positive flip of those is like, I'm really excited about essentially bringing discipline back to my own like spiritual practices. Like instead of just studying, like really drilling in, like really going deep. And, I'm kind of fortunate that, at least from my perspective now, it's like, well, actually the way I would want to do that is in the 100 days container. Like it's got all the practices that I'm trying to focus on right now. It's a commitment I'm making to myself. So yeah, both personally and professionally, like the 100 days are the focus. And yeah, the Hero 100 coming on the 14th of January, trying to do the line that's been coming to me is like trying to give people a resolution that actually works instead of the insane failure rates of traditional New Year's resolutions. Give something that actually works and actually delivers.
Is the deadline to join the 14th of January? What's the deadline to actually join the program?
The deadline to join is the 10th. We're going to close doors on the 10th because yeah, we have a couple apps and like orientation stuff that we've got to get people into and through. So we need a couple days for that.
To the people that are listening after the 10th, right? So there may be somebody like this, like, oh, it's the 25th of January. What can they do? Like, what's the plan for those guys?
Two things. One is you go to hero100.org. You can get put on the wait list. I mean, you can raise your hand for, I think if I had to make a decision right now, I honestly think we're probably only going to run 2 a year. Do the Hero 100 and do the Warrior 100 and just make them continue to really refine them. I mean, the other option is there's nothing, at least at the level of the challenges themselves, there's nothing proprietary here, right? You could actually do this. You could do your own adventure of it. 3-minute cold shower, 20 minutes journaling, 20 minutes meditation, get rid of something every day, a 15-minute or so personal ritual, and abstain from something every day. Like I believe that the power for our experience is that we do this collectively. Everyone gets put in their own accountability groups. Like I think the community is part of it, but you can DIY this, and I'm certainly not interested in just keeping it behind bars.
Yeah, I would probably add a little bit of a cautionary note with that piece of advice. I think if you know yourself to be just like highly disciplined and you just very good at sticking to things, sure, go and DIY it. But if you feel like you have a track record of falling off, feel free to DIY it if you're listening to this after it, but also don't get disheartened if you fail, right? I mean, part of the reason you've created this course is for that additional level of support, right? Where you do it as a cohort. So, like things are easier and more fun when you do it with others. That goes for nearly everything in life, including practices like this.
Oh, completely. It changes the game. And yeah, I mean, you nailed it, right? Part of it was born out of my own pain and personal frustration of just, why do I always start from day one again? Why am I always dropping these? What do I need to do? What needs to change? And one of the biggest things that needed to change was I needed to get out of the lone wolf mentality. Needed to get out of doing everything by myself and actually start doing it with friends and peers and people I respect.
And most coaches have coaches for a reason, like it kind of goes back to that, right? Even though you might be a good coach yourself, it's so useful to have other people kind of guiding you, pointing things out. That's unanimous. The people that I often go to for health and nutrition advice, they themselves have coaches who they go to for health and nutrition guidance. They may know the answer, but when your emotions start getting high, maybe you have a bit of self-doubt, a bit of perfectionism comes in. That's when it's useful to have other people around, right? That can kind of calm you down and get you focused. So yeah. EB, it's been an honor having this discussion with you. I'll include links to all of the relevant places. Any links off the top of your head that people should know about? Maybe if they're not going to go check the show notes.
No, I write at Serious Play at Substack, seriousplay.substack.com, hero100.org. that is the vast majority of where my time goes right now. Yeah.
Cool. That's easy to remember. Nice. Appreciate it.
Of course. John, man, thank you. I said it at the beginning, I always love these. I always get so much out of them. Thank you so much.